Good morning, Arlin. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing really well, Ryan. Great to be with you.
I'm looking forward to having you on the show. You are kind of a legend in the managed IT space with all the different people that you bring together with the HTG Peer Groups that you've had, and then also the background and a lot of the different experiences that you've had over the decades of being in the managed IT and technology world. So for the listeners that might not be too familiar with your background, can you go back to how you went from a farmer into technology? Because I think, there's got to be a bridge there somewhere.
Yeah, well, it certainly wasn't a planned bridge, but there definitely is a bridge. I came back to the farm in 1977 with the full intent of spending the rest of my life running the family farm operation with my brother. And in '82, I bought my first computer, an Apple II Plus, 16K dual floppy drive machine, and a piece of farm accounting software. I had seen some computers at some different ag industry events, and decided that I needed a machine to keep my accounting current with. So I spent $4,000 actually to buy that powerhouse, and but I got me hooked on computers, and over the course of the next few years, I started to help other farmers go to Omaha, and that was the closest place we could get a computer, and I'd help them pick one out, bring it back, help set it up, and teach them how to use the accounting system. And after a couple of years of that, it became obvious to me that either I had to stop doing that or I had to charge something for my time, because I instantly became the tech support guy too. And they were calling me all the time to help them. And as that grew, I had to create a little sideline business to get into the industry. And so in '85, that's really when I set up official shop and started to sell farm accounting packages. And over the course of the next 5 years, moved into the business world. And from there, we started a company that really focused on using technology to drive business outcomes for folks.
So, and you've had quite a couple different milestones and steps throughout your journey as an entrepreneur. So, with that business that you had started and then you had grown, what can you kind of give us a little bit of the backdrop of it? How did you guys go, and what were some of the growth? Because there was a couple other times in there that you ended up merging before you ended up eventually selling it, correct?
Correct. Yeah, from '85 really through 2002, it was a business we ran here, actually from the farm. So over the course of that time, I added on the end of my house 5 different times, and we've got 12,500 square feet of office space attached to my house out here in the middle of a cornfield. But we got to Y2K, and we're doing pretty well. We staffed up because of the pending opportunity that was supposed to change the world, and we had grown to 36 folks by that time, and Y2K came, and no business came with it, and all of a sudden we were faced with having about 10 people more than we had work for, and that was a really challenging period of time. We had pretty decent growth up till then, but we kind of got stuck right there, and we ended up having to let some folks go, and the business really kind of plateaued. We were doing about $4 million in revenue at that time, and in 2002, after we'd had 4 consecutive years of really flat performance, we decided to take a different approach and went down the M&A trail. And over the next 10 years, we did 10 different merger acquisitions across the Midwest. So when we actually sold the company at the end of 2012, we had 7 offices across 5 states and a little over 100 folks in the organization. So, we did the organic approach for the first 20 years or so, and then we took the M&A approach for the last 10, and that was a very learning experience, to say the least. But definitely, as I grow companies, M&A is something that I think is certainly got a place if you want to really take your company to another level.
Well, and there's so much I want to impact there because I think, 10 doing 10 acquisitions over 10 years, you're learning a lot. So, you know, in the, M&A as a growth strategy, I think is also a very interesting topic that I want to unfold as well. But maybe Arlen, can you explain how did you shift your mindset in that challenging time where you were flat? So because I think there, right before the call, you and I were talking about the difference between a lifestyle business and then creating enterprise value. Did you have a shift in like, hey, here's what's the ultimate goal and how am I going to get there? And then how did you land on M&A being part of the growth strategy?
Well, I wish I could say I had a grand plan for why we took that strategy. To be honest, it was driven mostly by my frustration in being able to continue to grow the company where we were. We're out here in the middle of rural Iowa, and our trade area at the time was basically a couple hour radius from Harlan, and most of the communities we served were, you know, 3,000 to 7,500 people. So we had penetrated pretty deeply, and I just came to the realization that if we really wanted to grow any further, we were going to have a bigger geography. And we had tried doing some remote offices and in smaller communities around the region, and it was just tough to go in there and start from scratch and build something. So I knew people in the industry through some of the different community events and industry events that I went to, and got to talking to them. And there were some that were looking for an exit strategy. And I certainly had no idea what I was really doing when we started down the path, but we dove in head first and did a couple acquisitions the first year. And, um, you know, part,
How did that look?
well,
Like, as in, did you just like chat with someone at a trade show? Because I think that happens a lot. I mean, was there certain synergies that you're looking for? But what sparked it with the first
yeah,
acquisition?
the first one was actually a merger where my strength was really around technical things and some of the operational stuff. I was dangerous as far as financials and some of the back office things, and I really was not very good at sales. And so when we came together with Connecting Point and Joplin, a big driver was that two partners that came out of that were a CFO and a vice president of sales. And so it filled the two biggest weaknesses that we had in the company. And that was a very important piece of us being able to scale from there. We finally put together a team that wasn't just technically focused and able to fix most any problem, but we actually could run the company profitably and had some controls. And then we had a sales engine for the first time that really had some focus, and we began to build the sales engine to allow us to continue to grow as we added in companies. Most IT companies are not very strong on the sales side, and that was certainly our case. So that first one was all about bringing together a team of people that we could build on and create a platform from. And then the second one that year was a individual that was looking to get out of the industry, had some health problems, and so it was a perfect way to test our platform. And we had plenty of bumps in the road, but it really went pretty smoothly, and we found that we could layer in a company and in fairly short order bring them online and leverage our back office systems and move us forward. So that was really the start of using a platform to go to the next level.
So, which I think is extremely a huge point because whether it's a platform to do your own M&A or to give to someone else, there's going to be a huge amount of value that's created there. And before we dive into that, how when you have these different individuals and you did that merger, Arlen, how did you guys like determine like what is the operating agreement? Who has what shares? I mean, how did you guys divide up and value both of those companies? And then how did you like in your platform from the tech side? Did you have anything on the finance side to figure out how this is how we're going to do it?
Well, from a valuation perspective, we just agreed to use the same formula on both companies, and there wasn't a lot of really deep scientific things we put in place. We kept it simple. We looked at the balance sheets of both. Both had fairly good balance sheets, and we put a formula in place to kind of value the company, and then we created a new corporation and rolled both of them in at the percentages that the valuations indicated. So we made that pretty simple. And what happened as we came together was that Jane, who's the financial genius, she came in and we had known each other probably for 3 or 4 years ahead of this, off and on. So she had some idea of kind of let's say the creative ways that I would manage finances, and she pretty much came in and put a kibosh to things and got us running the business the way it needed to be run. So we immediately moved over to their platform in terms of financials, using the Great Plains accounting system. And put in her controls and discipline, and that was huge. We brought to the table the technical side and ConnectWise and the way that we were operating the service delivery side of the business, and implemented that. And so it was a pretty immediate. We got holes in lots of different ways. We picked the best of breed solutions from the two companies and implemented them immediately, and that became our platform going forward.
Which is awesome. And a couple questions on the financials. So what was some of the things I like how you called it creative. So what are some of the things that she did on the financials to put in some controls? Was there certain standards that she had then layered on top of yours, or what was some of the things that you guys did to make sure that you all had the same playbook?
Yeah, I mean, from a standards perspective, we didn't really have any. So she brought a lot of discipline. The bill reviews and things. Paying bills for me was like Saturday night when I had to get them out because they were due on Monday, kind of thing. And I didn't review them carefully. I didn't have any kind of plan around doing that, and a lot of times invoicing would pile up and not get out because it just wasn't high on my priority list. And so we got into a very disciplined financial approach of, we had two people signing checks, so we had control over that. We had invoicing that went out every week, and it was very structured and done the right way. And so that really served us well as we grew and scaled. We implemented the majority of the processes and procedures that she had built in her own company, and laid those across what we were doing. And Great Plains brought a lot of discipline that the early versions of QuickBooks didn't really have from a financial perspective. So it was just it was the right thing at the right time to help us really build a solid financial footing. And then when we had our weekly meetings, we actually looked at numbers. We had a budget. I mean, there were things that I had just kind of, if there was money in the account, we were doing okay, kind of thing. And that all changed to, what are we trying to accomplish? What's our balance sheet look like? What's the cash flow projections look like? What's the pipeline look like? All things that were pretty foreign to me at the time. I was running it by the seat of my pants and just making it happen. And so that's when we got a little more mature.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that do that, and and filling the talent gaps is a really big challenge. And so it's being able to get the talent together and then actually build this platform. So in your mind, and what's your definition of a platform, and then how did you guys use that and change your strategy going forward?
Well, a platform to me is really the assembly of best of breed products and tools that are configured with a team of people around those things that can execute them consistently with discipline over time. And then a a team of leaders that can guide the strategy and execution of that platform to scale a business. And so, we brought together those things and we built that, and it became really our way of building value in the company, because we used the platform then to do acquisitions, and we did one other merger along the journey where we brought in a COO, because that was kind of a weak spot we discovered over time, that we just didn't have enough leadership in terms of managing operations. And so we brought one more key leader into the mix through an acquisition. But most of what we did was buying companies that had established customer bases and plug those into our back office and our platform of delivery, and then migrated them quickly to that platform so that we could leverage the cost savings and the efficiencies by having everybody on the same thing.
So what were some of the KPIs? Because you mentioned creating and growing company value, which I want to, really dive into. And what were the KPIs on that you were that you were measuring to make sure that you were judging on how well you were doing? Was it, a valuation formula? And then were there layers of KPIs from customers to profitability to what were some of the things that you were measuring? And then how did you use that to then roll in these other companies?
Yeah, so we measured a lot of things. The one of the beauties of having a financial genius like we did was that she was able to create a dashboard for us, pulling data from the accounting system, from ConnectWise, from some of the other tools we had in place, and provide us real-time daily information on what was going on in the operation. And that became a huge and important piece for me trying to run the company. I knew what was going on for the first time, in my career, actually. A lot of times in the past, it was, gut feel, because I didn't have data. But Jane brought it all together into a dashboard that was in my inbox every morning. And it told us, my number one concern was cash flow. We were rapidly growing. We were hiring people. We were doing all kinds of stuff. And cash is king, and it causes a lot of companies to have real challenges. So that was the number one thing I watched every day. Valuation, there's all kinds of formulas. There's all kinds of ideas of what companies are worth. At the end of the day, people buy companies that have got consistent profit. And so we monitored carefully EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, because that's really what most companies in this industry are bought off of. And so we wanted to watch that and make sure that we were consistently driving a profit. To do that, of course, we got to watch our service delivery efficiency. So we monitored a KPI called the W2 multiple. That is something that service leadership taught us, which is about.
I was going to say, can you explain it?
It's for basically listeners? How many dollars of service revenue are being generated per dollar of W2 expense. And so you want to have a number that's around 3 times. So if you're paying a service delivery engineer, say $50,000, you need them to be generating $150,000 in service revenue to really be able to cover costs, cover benefits, and have some money left at the end of the day. And so we monitored that very carefully, and we set our comp program up to align to that. And we comped engineers more if they drove higher W2 multiples. But that was a key part. We had 36 engineers on the road at our peak, and so they were a huge part of our ability to drive profitability. Gross margin was another one. We were a large product reseller, so we monitored gross margin carefully to make sure that, we weren't selling product too cheaply and that kind of stuff. So There was a number of things on the dashboard, but those were some of the key ones that I paid really close attention to.
Well, and I think you hit on a lot of good things, and I think what's really interesting is when you have high level numbers that you're watching, there's a lot of decisions that layer in and make it easier to develop things around there. Where if you've got EBITDA that you're always looking at and you're trying to drive it, because you mentioned consistent profitability, and that's easier to
Yep.
transfer the profit to any additional future buyer, whether it's internal, external, all that stuff. And then if you have the W2 ratio models, you're going to be driving efficiency. So, I think, what's really interesting about the managed IT services industry that a lot of different industries also struggle with, you're going from trading dollars for hours to having a machine and a system. Did you guys start out at break fix and then, merge into the managed IT and scripting and all these other things? Or did you start there? And I think, how did certain service delivery things that you were doing, were there ideas that you had came up with and how you looked at that stuff because of those ratios you were looking at?
Yeah, for sure. We started back in the '80s, so we definitely didn't start with managed services. We were a break fix shop that went through the different transitions to doing some proactive services where we would actually try to call customers and go out and proactively look at their stuff and deal with that, to then selling block time to people where they could prepay for a block of hours and get a discount, to the point where we finally began to do some managed IT services where it was all about a fee for in exchange for keeping an environment functional. And that happened over a number of years, but it's a model that allows you to scale. And it's difficult to manage that, especially getting it started. But once you get it in place and you have the right systems on the back end and you can automate a lot of things, that's when you're able to actually kind of take advantage of the platform and use it to drive revenue and profitability.
So what were some of the things that what was difficult about some of those? You said it's difficult to manage. What's difficult to manage about it?
Well, one of the first challenges is that we had spent decades teaching our customers that they only needed to pay money if there was a big problem. And with managed IT, the idea is it's somewhat like insurance. You pay no matter what's going on, and you're paying for the reality that your systems are just going to work. And so we had to kind of untrain all of our clients and teach them a new way of thinking, where it was not the pay as you go kind of thing, but you pay monthly and it's better for you that way. And that was a tough transition. But the other thing that is really difficult in the transition is, for years we had been rewarding engineers for hours worked and billed. And when you go to a managed IT environment, you win when you're not putting hours on the customer account, basically, because you've done a good job and you're using automation and tools to help keep the systems running. So you reward engineers for not working on machines because they've done a great job of keeping them healthy and working along the way. And so it's a complete mind shift. We had to redo our entire comp plan model. And anytime there's a change like that, it's difficult to educate and get everybody on board.
Well, and were those KPIs that you were mentioning, those were helping you determine that it was worth the effort, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's no question that as you go through these different gyrations in any industry as it matures, is that the profitability, starts strong and then it starts to wane and fall off, and you've got to jump curves and go to another business model. So we've been through a handful of those, to say the least. And each time you watched your profitability fall off before you jumped to the next thing, and then had to build up, the operational efficiencies and back in to make those things profitable again.
So, I think, that's a lot of industries and a lot of companies have to go through those gyrations, like you mentioned. But did you guys have a foot because of the M&A that you were doing? You were starting to, you had very, real live experience of how things were valued because you're the buyer, right? You're managing risk and then looking at your way of how the bigger enterprise works. When you have those gyrations in the profitability, knowing that you've got the foresight on enterprise value, how did you see these these things that you were implementing change the overall efficiencies of your company, but also the valuation of the business? Because I think it's like a foot in this year's cash flow, but then also a foot in the enterprise value. It's a constant balance.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, and obviously cash flow is a big driver in how much of that you can do. What we saw over time was that we got better at basically acquiring employees and customers from an organization and plugging those into our system. So in the early days, we didn't really know what we were doing around employee onboarding, employee training, and all the things that we needed to bring the people that we acquired up to speed quickly so they could contribute and didn't feel lost for the first 6 months that they worked for us because we weren't doing a very good job of bringing them on board. We had the same issue with customers. We often were transitioning their world from what they were accustomed to our platform and service delivery model, and in a lot of cases that was coming off a block time or break fix kind of relationships into a monthly recurring model, and it took a lot of education, a lot of sales calls and things like that to educate and bring them up to speed so they could plug into the system. We struggled far more retaining employees when we did acquisitions than we did customers. Customers were pretty willing to stick and ride through the changes. Employees were a much more of a challenge for us because we were shifting mindset and what they were accustomed to doing. We were giving them a whole new set of tools to work with, and for the first time in a lot of cases they were smaller companies, so they were getting reviews and things they weren't accustomed to, and we were measuring them, in ways that they weren't used to, and so we lost some folks as we did acquisitions just due to the changes that were part of what was going to happen.
So, I think you when you're looking at these companies and the 10 acquisitions that you did, and then we can kind of migrate into the overall things that you're seeing in the marketplace. But like, how did what were some of the things that you were seeing them, because you've built this platform, which is all the things to do right, right? And then you would look at these people of all the things that they're not doing right. So, if you take, I don't know if you got maybe some hypothetical numbers of, okay, if you take a $2 million company with, 400 grand EBITDA, and how did you value that? And then when you brought that profit stream into your machine, did the value change? Because you're almost getting a direct return on your investment as you're plugging it in. Right? Is that kind of the whole approach that you guys were looking at?
Well, yeah, but it's not immediate, and that's probably the biggest thing that people get wrong, in my opinion, about M&A. There's a lot of folks that think 1+1 is going to equal 3. And my experience is that the first year 1+1 is more like 1.6 to 1.8. It's not even 2. You take a dip before you're able to make the changes that are necessary to then begin to capitalize on what your acquisition is. So that's a fallacy that I see a whole lot of people walk into, especially on their first M&A, and they think that they've just struck gold, and they find out that the money's flowing the wrong way, and that's just part of what happens in an acquisition situation. But valuation is based on a whole lot of factors, and a lot of times it depends on the situation that the ownership is in and what they're trying to accomplish and how they want to get paid. And my perspective is the number is not nearly as important as the structure of the deal. I see some high dollar offers out there that have got terms that are not very favorable for the seller. And over time, they often end up with less money than a much lower offer they could have gotten for cash up front. So we tried to focus on kind of the structure of the deal with those that we acquired to help the owner achieve what they wanted to accomplish. In some cases, they had debt they needed to get rid of. In other cases, they were looking for more long-term employment, and so their employment agreement was a driver. In some cases, they were looking for income that was stretched out over time that helped them manage some of the tax implications of a sale. So we focused a lot on the structure of the deal and tried to make that part of the attractiveness to the seller, and that allowed us then to figure out how to really maximize the business value creation on our side, and then drive efficiencies into the customers that we acquired, and turn them into profit as soon as we could.
Well, I think you hit on a huge thing. I mean, the deal structure is the thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs see this, oh, gotcha, after the fact.
Right.
It's like, hey, I'll pay, like, I could pay you $20 million for your company, but it's going to take me, 25 years. And so, and there's going to be all these, drivers that essentially you've got a glorified sales position versus
Exactly.
owning your company. And, I don't, because of maybe, we can kind of shift into the HTG as you guys, maybe how did you guys, what was the final decision that you had to eventually sell the business? And then what were some of the things that you learned throughout that? And why did you end up, migrating over to HTG?
Well, HTG started in 2000. It grew out of the struggles we were having as a company with Y2K. And one of my employees actually said, we ought to call some other Iowa companies and just see if they're having the same problem with Y2K as we are, and or if we're just too stupid to see where the opportunities are. And so that's what we did. In April of 2000, we called 3 other Iowa companies and asked if they'd meet us in Des Moines for a half a day to share notes on what was going on with Y2K, and they all showed up, and we actually spent the whole day together because we got so much value out of just talking to each other about business. And so that grew over time. And when I finally decided to exit HTS at the end of 2012, which was the IT company, I had really lost my passion for the business, quite honestly, and was having a lot more fun working with HTG, which had grown significantly. And the other thing was that the cloud transition was right there, and I really wasn't looking to do another major business modification and shift. So we hadn't really had a plan to sell the company. I got a call out of the blue and followed up with the broker, and it appeared to be real. One of the best things that I've used in selling the 2 companies I have is I had a predetermined list of things that were non-negotiable.
What were some of them?
If I was going to sell the company, I had a list of things that had to be true. And in the case of HTS, some of them were they couldn't go in and close down the rural locations that we were serving, because our model was we were serving smaller locations around larger metro areas, but we wanted to take care of the smaller businesses. And so that was something, and they had to take care of our employees. We weren't going to allow somebody to come in, buy the customer list, and fire our team. So we had this list of things that were a requirement, and in order for us to really even have a conversation. And of course, as most business owners, we got lots of phone calls from people that wanted to buy our business or thought they did. And my immediate response was, hey, I'll send you our list of non-negotiables, and if you're good with it, give me a call. I never got any callbacks until October of 2012, and this company said, "Okay, you know what? We'll do this. We're from a small rural area ourselves, and in 3 months we sold the company and moved on."
Well, and I think so. There's a couple things that you mentioned. So you said you didn't really have any plan to selling, but yet you had these predetermined. So, was there over the course of these 10 acquisitions? I mean, did that help you formulate those non-negotiables because you watched the situations? So even though you weren't ready per se, you had something and an idea and a plan for should you be ready.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the things that Jane, our CFO, was really stuck on, is we had to run the business every day like we were going to sell it. And so, we talked about what would cause us to sell on a regular basis, and we ran the business financially, not messing around with the numbers and trying to make them look any which way or other. It was, the numbers need to be the way the numbers are, and we need to run it like we would sell it tomorrow. And that served us really, really well. Kept discipline in what we were doing, and I as I consult with a lot of companies, a lot of things get messed around with financially, where owners will take money for this, that, or the other thing, and that's a privilege and a right of owning and running a business. But when you get to the point of sale, we didn't really have any add backs or deducts from our numbers because we ran it clean, and so there, it made the transaction go pretty smoothly.
Well, you ran it clean, and I'm assuming because you've done it 10 times by that point, and you've also been, in the HTG talking to other business owners, you had probably, whether it was written down or not, did you have the answers to the questions that you knew were going to come?
Sure. We had done a lot of due diligence, and we knew what the due diligence process would look like, and the company that purchased us, they brought 6 folks into my office for a week and set up, and they looked at everything very carefully, but they found everything because we had run the company in a way that kept it ready for that kind of inspection. And so clean these things up, and we got to shred this stuff, and we got to hide this, and whatever. It was, sure, here's the files, go to it. And so there's a lot that can be done just by running a business in a disciplined way so that you're prepared whenever that time comes.
So, and I know you guys do a lot of education and preaching of that in HTG. So, when we kind of shift the conversation, I'm curious because of the sheer exposure that you have to the managed IT services industry, and there's, like you and I were saying before that we got on the air, is that it's an epidemic all across a lot of different industries. What are the things that you're seeing that people aren't doing consistently that they should be, in order to kind of have their eyes wide open?
Well, Ryan, I think the biggest thing that we see that people are not doing is, number one, to have a plan for what they want to accomplish financially. That starts with what they need personally to have available when they're going to quit getting a paycheck and they need to live on whatever they've accumulated. So we call that a personal wealth target. People need to know how much money they need to accumulate so they can live the rest of their life. And, the best advice we've been able to find from financial planners that we've talked to is that you need to know how you're going to come up with basically 25 to 40 times whatever you live on today. So if you spend $100,000 a year to live today, you need to have $2.5 million of assets that you can leverage to live out your time after you quit getting a paycheck. Most people have no concept of how much it costs to live and have no plan for how they're going to accumulate that beyond Social Security, if there is any, and maybe a little bit of retirement funds. But when you look at the data for the United States, something over 55% of people can't handle a $5,000 unexpected bill. And those folks are all going to retire someday. And so that's the first thing we see is, what's the personal need you have? And then as a business owner, that has to tie into how much business value do you need to create to make sure that you fund that personal gap, because that's what most business owners think is going to happen. They're going to sell their company. They're going to have all the money they need from selling the company to take care of their personal needs. And I can tell you from watching dozens and dozens of sales over the last few years that often does not happen. People try to equate hard work as value. And I can tell you, buyers don't buy hard work. They don't care if you worked 80 hours a week for 25 years in your company. They're going to buy it based on what that company is able to generate into the future. And it's not hard work. So,
well, it's interesting, Arlin, because going back to the work smarter, not harder, right? And
yep.
then in those numbers, if I had $1 for every time I saw someone's face kind of look weird when you say, okay, so if your company is $5 million in revenue, maybe $1 million or so in EBITDA, then maybe it's worth 5 times. So you got $5 million. And by the way, you pay 45% in taxes, and then the rest is going to come over time. And then you're not going to have a company credit card to run through your trips in your cars.
Yep.
And next thing, you've got holy shit, what do I have left?
Exactly. That's exactly true. And so people they've got to do the math, right? And that's probably the biggest mistake I see that happens out there, is that they're uninformed about the reality of the numbers. And we're spending a lot of time with owners just doing simple spreadsheets where we ask a few questions and plug in the numbers, and we watch their faces, just like you said, and their jaws drop wide open. And when you look at companies that are marginally profitable and they need to generate significant amount of EBITDA to be able to sell the company to meet a target. And I've seen numbers where companies are doing $3 million in revenue today at very low profitability, but they want to end up with a business that's going to give them $10 million. Let's say. They've got to grow from 3 million to 50 million.
You need 3 million in EBITDA
to get to the EBITDA number that they need to get to the profit number, or to the sale number. And it's just it's not computed. They're not connected in their mind that this stuff all really, really matters. And everybody thinks that, we can fix it tomorrow. And I can tell you that it's not a tomorrow fix. It takes years to fix things and get them to a place where it's going to achieve what the end game is. So people have got to get their numbers figured out.
Well, what's interesting too, and I think you guys are doing justice to it, because if you think about your coming from the managed IT services space, and all of a sudden you gamify being a tech and a service delivery. You got the ConnectWise, you got the dashboards and ratios, and if you think about, this is my perspective of going through it too, is you got being an entrepreneur, you can gamify it, being okay, if you want 5 million net, how much do you need to grow the value of the company to? And then all of those KPIs that you had mentioned should tie to the enterprise value and your net proceeds.
Yep.
And you have very specific things that you're marching towards all day long, because you've got a reason to do it, instead of just saying, hey, I'm going to go buy a new boat or cabin.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all tied together. And the big challenge that we see is that people are not thinking like business owners in this particular area, and they got to make a shift. They got to invest the time to learn their own financials and learn how the market really works, so that they can not get to a place. I mean, one of the saddest conversations I've had in the recent few years has been with a guy in South Carolina that called me and said, I'm selling my business. I've had 4 different offers. They're taking advantage of me. Can you look at my numbers and tell me what's fair? And I looked at his numbers and I said, you know what? These offers are not out of line.
Right.
They're paying you what this company's really worth. And he said, you don't understand. I have missed every basketball game, every anniversary, every birthday. I traded my life for this company for 27 years. I can't sell it for this. My wife will kill me. I said, man, I don't know what to tell you other than you should have worried about this a long time ago. And he ended up selling his company for about 10% of what he had promised his wife he was going to get for it,
Oh.
and had to go get a job. He couldn't afford to retire. And so that, those kind of stories are all too happening all too often.
Well, and I've seen it myself, and with the people that I've talked to, or our clients or the interviews, and what and I'm curious on what you've seen is once someone has that experience, the eye opening. Okay, I've got a target I got to hit. How have you seen their strategy and their focus shift because they've got a specific thing that they're trying to do? So going back to kind of the context of my question is the hard things that you have to do from changing business models or replacing the people that aren't working out. Have you seen it where people make those determinations faster, quicker, or easier because they've got a reason to do it? Or, I mean, what's the correlation there?
Yeah, absolutely. We press our members to write a plan. Number one, so they've got to put it on paper, which is a big part of the process. If you write it down, that will help. And then you've got to look at the different levers you have available to pull to really help you accomplish that plan. So a lot of it is looking at key metrics and understanding which ones will move the needle the quickest to help you get to where you want to go, and what do you need to do to make that happen. In a lot of cases, it's just drive up the way they run their company. And if you're running a company that's running at 5% profitability and you needed to get it to 10%, the first discipline you have to have is every time you make a decision, you've got to ask yourself, is this a 10% decision? And you have to realize that if it's not, then you better have another one that's a 15% decision that's going to offset the one you just made for 5%. And we have to just train our minds to think profit first. So many small business owners feel guilty making a profit, and they don't recognize that it's their future that they're gambling away when they choose to make poor decisions on profitability. So it starts with writing a plan, putting it on paper, sharing it with people around you that can help hold you accountable and can help ask that kind of question. That's one of the values of a peer group is when we know that you're trying to accomplish X, we can ask you why you made a decision that didn't move you toward that. And all of us need that kind of accountability to keep us on track.
So, and I think peer groups, no matter what industry or wherever you go, you have to, especially as an entrepreneur owning a company, because you got to have someone that's going to actually hit you between the eyes.
Yep.
And not someone that's going to say yes because you pay their paycheck.
Right.
But I'm curious, Arlin, when you say, how do you guys, or how have you seen the balance between, you said looking at profit, and I think there's these decisions that's why I kind of went back from the foot in the annual cash flow bucket versus the foot in the enterprise. So if you have to invest, so I've seen a lot of people cheat on investing of like, a CFO. I'm going to hire the $80,000 person instead of the $120,000 person, because it's
Yep.
in fact profitability or my lifestyle. How do you guys, or how have you seen people balance that in a way that's actually effective or certain cases?
Well, there's no question that lifestyle drives a lot of the decisions. But the to me, the key is planning, right? And we drive people to have 4 plans that they need to have written down and updated every year and shared with their peer groups. They got to have a legacy plan, which tells us what's the end game they're trying to accomplish. And a big part of that is the financial goals that you need to have set in stone so you know what you're chasing. They got to have a life plan. How are they going to live the hours they're not in the workplace and make it meaningful? They got to have a leadership plan, which is how am I going to invest in myself as a leader? How am I going to invest in the key people around me that I need to help me succeed and achieve what I want from my legacy? And then they need a business plan, which drives how they're going to operate and run their business to drive toward the legacy they want to have. And if you get into the discipline of building those kind of plans and really, writing them down and having specifics, having a budget that means something that you manage against, it quickly becomes obvious when you've got shortfalls in talent or other things around you that you need to have to achieve those goals, and you can make better decisions. And so I'm a big believer that the main value of planning is it gives you a reason to say no to things. Entrepreneurs seldom say no to anything if it looks interesting, and often they need to say no to most things. So if you have a disciplined planning process, it gives you, the guidelines basically to say no. If it's not in the plan, the answer's got to be no, not right now. And if it's really important, then you have to adjust the plan and put it in there. But most people don't follow that mindset, and thus they'll make poor choices in how they spend the money they have, and come up short in key areas.
I mean, I couldn't echo what you just said any better. I mean, it's there's an analogy I give in a speech that I do where, if you think about Google Maps, it's like one of the most powerful tools on the planet. And if you don't plug in your point B, what happens?
Yeah. Nothing. That's right.
Yeah. Like, let's go to a quick trip across the country. Well, that wasn't on my way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super simple, but I think it hits home. You've got a ton of gold nuggets that you've given us. If there was one thing that you would like to highlight over the things that we've talked about, or one thing that you want to leave our listeners with, what would it be?
A lot of people sometimes feel like they can't do it. It's an impossible goal, and I would tell you from watching lots and lots of people, planning will get you where you want to go. If you plan your work and you work your plan will work. You got to make sure there's enough time in that equation, but planning is the key to not just making the amount of money that you need to personally succeed or driving the enterprise value of your business. Planning is how you succeed in life as well. And it's the willingness to be disciplined, to stop and think about what it is you really want to accomplish. It all's built on that legacy plan and where you're trying to end up. But you can work backward and figure out what needs to happen this year to move me there. And if you take that time and you are willing to really let planning work for you, you can accomplish whatever you want to achieve.
I mean, wow, well said. And I think with a plan, your ability to say no too. And I was just thinking as you were saying that too, and how these people are getting random offers and they don't know whether they should say no to that or not, because they don't know what kind of context to put it in.
Exactly. And that's where the non-negotiable thing is so important. If you've got a number that you're looking for, if you've got the kind of the contract requirements that you're looking for, if you know what it is you want, saying no is pretty easy.
Right. What's the best way to get in touch with you if our listeners want to know more?
They can connect with me by email. It's A Sorensen, ASORENSEN @scci.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. Then they can connect with me there, or on Twitter.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a blast.
Me too. Appreciate the time, Ryan.